One of the most striking figures of 20th century music is the composer and poly artist John Cage. John Cage lived from 1912 to 1992. His work spanned the entire century in a very real sense. John Cage was first a pianist and a composer. He was a busboy, at times a painter, somebody who was interested in many facets of the arts and in life in general. He also considered himself something of a philosopher. He, as a musician, invented a few things: terms, ideas, concepts, and even instruments. One of the things he invented was something called prepared piano. The idea is you take a piano, and in the strings you stick objects, so that instead of a key striking a string, you get the hammers striking objects and making bizarre sounds. This was one of the ways that he wanted to increase the timbral palette of 20th century music. He also worked on notational innovations, so that he could write music down not on lines and spaces with clefs, notes, key signatures, time signatures, but that he could direct musicians to take 5 seconds to do this, 10 seconds to do that. That's not the most important development of John Cage. John Cage found himself in the 1950s curious about the difference between sound and silence, in fact curious to redefine music itself. John Cage took himself into an anechoic chamber. In a recording studio, this is a chamber where all of the reverb from all of the walls and spaces is minimalized. And the idea is that you put on headphones so you can't hear any sounds around you. He thought he's going to finally listen to true silence. So he went in the chamber, put on the headphones, and listened to see what does silence really sound like. It turns out silence in an anechoic chamber doesn't sound like anything, because what he heard was his heart beating, the blood rushing through his veins, the sounds of the breath entering his own lungs. He discovered that for human beings who can hear, there is no such thing as silence. This was profoundly disturbing to John Cage, because if music is the difference between sound and silence, and there is no silence, what do we do? John Cage became then very interested in this idea of silence. Musicians nowadays in concert halls frame their performances with silence. It's quiet before we start, and it's quiet after we end a performance. If there's no real silence, where does the performance begin? Where does the audience listening end? It's really hard to tell. John Cage became aware then that music, including all of this non-silence, is really music just because we say, this span of time is my musical piece. Let me see if I can explain that a little more clearly. John Cage wrote a piece of music that some of you may have heard of called 4 minutes and 33 seconds. This piece lasts for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. It's divided up into several movements, and it was first performed by a pianist sitting down at the piano. And I'll show you how this piece works. I'm going to show you the beginning of the piece, and then I want you to listen carefully, including the sounds in the room around you, where you are right now watching this video. Here we go. Together, we're going to perform John Cage's 4 minutes and 33 seconds, a 30-second excerpt. The piece begins now. Well, that's enough. That's a good excerpt, maybe 15 seconds. My question for you as you sit there, you can answer it yourself, obviously I can't tell you the answer, is what did you hear? I heard, standing here in the library, the clicking of people typing. I heard a couple users of computers on the other side of this video camera typing away, and I even heard them breathing a little bit. I heard here the rush of the air conditioning system providing a sort of constant background. How about you? What did you hear wherever you are listening? Are you at a coffee shop and you hear whoosh, as somebody's making an espresso? Are you listening on the bus so you hear the traffic noise around you? Are you listening at home and maybe there's a toddler running by shouting and yelling while you're trying to listen? John Cage would say all of those sounds are part of this piece. What is the frame of silence of this piece of music is actually the piece of music. It's music because we say it is. Now I ask you, which of the elements of music does this piece use? Does it have a melody? Only if somebody were singing in the background while you were listening. Does it have rhythm? Well, maybe the clicking of the computer keys that I heard could be the rhythm. Does it have harmony? Well, is anybody playing pitches while you're listening? Cage says it's okay, we don't actually need all the elements of music to have music. The only thing we care about is this art begins because I say it begins. It ends because I say it ends. Cage became fascinated with this idea of anybody's music, anytime. He wasn't the only one. Lots of composers and artists as well were interested in happenings, where it's a little bit like the modern flash mob. People just get together and do something. Perhaps they fling paint on a canvas and yell and scream. Perhaps they recite poetry. Perhaps they record cars going by on the street. It doesn't matter. Art at this time period in the 1960s, one of the facets is that it becomes an expression of everyday human life, with all the parts of life that are occurring in the 1960s. War, peace, protest, the establishment, the non-establishment, all of those things happen. The next little piece that I'm going to show you is a particularly strange one of John Cage's, called Variations 4. I've performed this piece with students several times, and students really seem to love this piece because it's a piece of music in which there are no rules at all. In fact, the only thing defining this as a piece of music for me is the fact that it's in the music library as a musical score, and so if it's sitting on the shelf next to Beethoven and Mozart and Brahms, I guess it must be music because we've decided it's music. If you watch the next segment, you'll see how John Cage's Variations 4 feeds into the phenomenon or the interest in chaos as a topic in the 1960s.